Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to the English room in my channel MisterMaster Yoga. This session is presented by Kota Malang, Indonesia. Madrasah hebat, bermartabat. This instructional video is produced as part of the effort to provide online learning resources for high school students across Indonesia, especially during this study from home period. In this edition, we are going to learn about English for grade 10, semester 1 and 2. The topic of our discussion is past passive voice. The basic competence for this topic is analyzing and understanding the social function, concept, and construct of past passive voice. This topic is discussed in semester 1 for compulsory English or Bahasa Inggris wajib, and in semester 2 for elective English or Bahasa Inggris peminatan. In this discussion, we use two different books. Book 1 is Bahasa Inggris for grade 1 by Kemendikbud. This is for compulsory English. You guys can open chapter 5 on page 75 through 76. And the second book is Pathway to English 1 by Erlangga publisher. This book is for elective English or Bahasa Inggris peminatan. You guys can open chapter 11 on page 240. This is the second part of the discussion about passive voice, which is why I will not discuss details about it in this session. For those of you who want to learn details about the first part, which discusses about present passive voice, you can go to the description of this video and check the link that will direct you to the first part of the video, which discusses about present passive voice. Okay, dear learners, in this session, I'm going to start by discussing about how to construct past passive voice. I will then go through some examples about past active and passive voice. Then we will conclude our session by talking very briefly about why passive voice is used. Are you guys ready? Let's get started. Okay, now let's start our discussion by learning about how to construct past passive voice. There are 5 steps to change from an active sentence into passive voice. Step 1. Identify the subject, the verb tense, and the object of an active sentence. So let's check an example. Mumtaz wrote a letter. Okay, here we have Mumtaz as the subject. Wrote here is the verb tense. This is verb 2 because this is simple past tense. Okay, and then a letter is the object. So we have to be clear about subject, verb tense, and object of an active sentence before changing it into a passive voice. That's step 1. Now step 2. Move the object of the active sentence to become the new subject of the passive voice or passive sentence. In other words, we can say the object of an active sentence is now the subject of its corresponding passive voice. Let's check the example again. We have the sentence Mumtaz wrote a letter, and we know the object of the sentence is a letter. So we move a letter here to be the subject of the passive voice. So the sentence in passive voice will say, a letter was written by Mumtaz. Please notice that after subject in the passive voice, we have to be was because the subject is a letter and this is simple past. So a letter was written. Written here is past participle verb or verb 3. A letter was written by Mumtaz. That's step 2. Okay, now step 3. Check the verb tense in the active sentence. This step is really important because passive voice is used across many different tenses. So you must check the tense, the verb tense in the active sentence to make your passive voice correct. Okay, now step 4. Use the correct be in passive voice. This is really important because, like I said, that passive voice is used across many different tenses. So in this part, I will show you the guideline of using the correct be in different tenses in passive voice. If the main verb of the active sentence is in present, so the be in passive voice will be either am, is, or are, depends on the subject. If the main verb of the active sentence is in simple past, so the be used in passive voice is either was or were, depends on the subject. If the main verb in the active sentence is in continuous, so the be used in passive voice is being. If the main verb in the active sentence is in perfect tense, so the be used in passive voice is been. If the active sentence use modal auxiliary like will, can, may, must, etc., so the be used in passive voice is be. So that's the guideline of using the correct be in passive voice, and that's step 4. However, in this discussion, we will focus our discussion on past passive voice. Let's check one example. We have the example from the previous step. Mumtaz wrote a letter. That's an active sentence. And the passive sentence is a letter was written. We used to be was because the subject is a letter. A letter was written by Mumtaz. That's step 4. Okay, after learning from step 4 about different be used in passive voice, now step 5 is using the right be plus past participle verb or verb 3 in passive voice. Okay, now I will give you 2 different examples just to give you a better understanding about it. Sentence number 1. A letter was written by Mumtaz. That's the passive voice. A letter was, we used to be was, written. We have here verb 3, written by Mumtaz. A letter was written by Mumtaz. We used to be was because the subject is a letter. Okay? Now let's check another example. 3 letters were written by Mumtaz. Now the subject is 3 letters, so we used to be were and past participle or verb 3 written by Mumtaz. So that's the difference. In the first sentence we have a letter, we used to be was. But in the second sentence, we have 3 letters. So the to be on the right be used is were plus past participle written by Mumtaz. So the general pattern of past passive voice is subject plus was or were plus past participle verb or verb 3 plus by plus agent. That's the complete pattern. However, you can leave out the agent here if you think the agent is not known or not important. So you can just say subject plus was or were plus past participle verb or verb 3. That's it. So that's the 5 steps in constructing a past passive voice. Okay, dear learners, after learning the 5 steps in constructing past passive voice, now let's study some of the sentences in past active and passive voice. Well, I hope you will have a better understanding by practicing from the sentences. Now, sentence number 1. The active sentence says, Mr. Yazid assigned 5 students to make a poster. Like I said in the first step, that you have to identify the subject, verb tense, and object of the active sentence. So the subject is Mr. Yazid, and then assigned here verb 2 as the verb tense, and 5 students as the object to make a poster. Complement. So, from the sentence, now we move the object here to be the subject in passive sentence or passive voice. So, in the passive voice, we'll say 5 students were assigned. We used to be were here, not was, because now the subject is 5 students. So 5 students were assigned verb 3 by Mr. Yazid to make a poster. So Mr. Yazid here is now the agent in the passive voice, not anymore the subject. Okay? So that's sentence 1. Now let's check another examples. Someone stole my car. That's an active past tense. Okay? Someone stole my car. So the object here is my car. So we move the object here to be the subject in the new passive voice. So it will say, my car was stolen by someone. We used to be was here because the subject is now my car. My car was stolen, verb 3, by someone. Well, someone here is not known or not important agent. So you can either put it there or you can just leave out the agent. So you can simply say, my car was stolen. Okay? Let's check another example, or the last example. Someone vandalized the building last night. That's an active sentence in simple past tense. Someone vandalized the building last night. The object is the building. So now, to make the passive voice, we move the building or the object here to be in the subject in the passive voice. So the passive voice will say, the building was vandalized. We used to be was because now the subject is the building. The building was vandalized. Vandalized here is verb 3 or past participle verb by someone. Or you can say the building was vandalized. So from the 3 examples, I really hope now you have a better understanding about how to construct passive voice. Okay, dear learners, after learning and practicing, the next question is, why do we use passive voice? So there are at least 3 reasons why we use passive voice. Number 1, to change the focus of a sentence. In active sentence, sometimes the object of the sentence is the most interesting part, or the most important part, so we need to move, to switch the object of the sentence to be the subject in the passive sentence. Well, this is especially very important in written English. That's reason number 1. So reason number 2, to have a sentence or sentences variety or variation in sentences. Please imagine if you write an article or you write like essay, and then you use all active sentences. I went to blah 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 blah, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that, and so on and so forth. So if you use all the active sentence, your article or your essay will be very boring. That's why we use passive voice. Now, reason number 3, to have a good coherence and flow of our sentences. If you want to have your sentences more understandable and flow from one sentence to another sentence, or from one idea to another idea, in order to make your writing more enjoyable to read, so you can use passive voice for that. So, dear students, in short, we can say that passive voice is mostly used in formal English and not personal. Okay, that's very much the end of our discussion about passive voice. I hope you guys learned something from this very short session. Now please get back to your book and do the practices there. Thank you so much for joining my session. Thank you Mandua Kota Malang for organizing this presentation. Mandua Kota Malang, jujur, percaya diri, berprestasi. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye bye.